Every day, something dramatic happens in the Caribbean that affects our lives. We'll give you the details. We'll give you the facts on Caribbean Perspective with Eddie Frederick. How's Eddie Frederick?
So glad you can join us. Improvement in correspondent banking noticed by the ECCB. This story takes the lead in today's edition of Caribbean Perspective for Monday, 20th March 2023. Details when we return.
Hubbard's Motor Department Mount Gay and Hubbard's Tire Bay, located at the Building Supplies Compound in Grand Anse, are reminding the motoring public that another round for licensing and inspection has begun. Just arrived on new shipments of quality furrowed and torque tires to fit all makes and models of vehicles at competitive pricing. Shop early to avoid the hassle of long lines. WhatsApp them on 473-405-5482. Hubbard's, quality service, affordable prices.
Welcome back. The situation with correspondent banking in the Eastern Caribbean has improved, said Timothy Antwine, Governor of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank. Correspondent banking institutions enable cross-border financial transactions or payments to occur, but such banks were being placed under pressure in countries such as the United States with new penalties on breaches of money laundering and terrorism. To reduce their risks, some correspondent banks ceased doing business with Caribbean-based commercial banks. Glenn Bart of SKN Newsline reports.
For St. Nevis, the consolidation of banks seemed to have helped, as Governor Antoine recently explained.
So the situation has stabilized for the most part, and part of that is the truth. The truth is that with the consolidation in the banking sector, with the purchase of the Canadian operations by our indigenous banks, Scotia, RBC, and now of course there's discussion about FCIB, our indigenous banks have actually become larger. So if you think of Bank of Nevis, for example, it's now $1 billion bank, 5 billion or whatever the size is. So they have become more attractive for the correspondent banks. So that pressure has eased. So just to say, stabilized, but we remain very watchful with respect to correspondent banks. They're very important for what we do. Trade, business. And what are the concerns that the financial community has? They're concerned about money laundering. They're concerned about terrorist financing. They're concerned about proliferation financing. They're concerned about fraud. They're concerned about tax evasion. These are some of the risks that are presenting or are they concerned about. Have to be responsible, and we are. So we take steps at great cost, to protect our financial systems. And not just the ones here in the currency union, but the global financial system of which we are part. So that work will never end. It's a constant attention to detail with respect to the banking system and our engagement with the correspondent banks. But in some, stabilize, and we remain very vigilant.
Glenn Bart reporting for SKN Newsline.
Trinidad and Tobago's Attorney General comes under more fire and called on to resign for his role in the spat with the DPP's office. More from this HGP Nightly News item.
Opposition leader Kamla Prasad Bezizar on Thursday described Armour as the worst AG in the country's history and called on him to apologize to the DPP and resign in order to protect the office of the Attorney General. Armour said the DPP's office was underperforming following DPP Roger Gaspard's call for more staff and warning of a collapse of the criminal justice system. State attorneys from the DPP's office delivered a letter to the AG's office demanding an apology. Prasad Bezizar added to the criticisms against the Attorney General, saying no one could have imagined how inept Armour would have turned out to be as the replacement for the disastrous Faris Al-Rawi. Prasad Bezizar said there were a number of controversial matters under Armour's tenure over the past year and that this was an, and I quote, incomprehensible level of professional incompetence and negligence that would have seemed to have reached its limit. Yet, this list of fiasco keeps growing, unquote. The former Prime Minister said under her administration, a cabinet decision was taken that the DPP's office be staffed with 137 prosecutors. She noted that today, under the Dr. Keith Rowley regime, there are 58 prosecutors. She said, and I quote, Armour should, and I quote, summon any honor left within himself, apologize to the DPP and resign in order to protect the office of the Attorney General, unquote. Prasad Bazizar said Armour has made a total mess of any legislation he has brought to Parliament.
Former head of the Police Service Commission of Trinidad and Tobago, Professor Ramesh Diosaran, gives his analysis of the staffing issues at the DPP's office and expresses hope that the situation can be ironed out for the good of the country. He was speaking on TV6 Morning Edition. Nicole M. Ramani of TV6 News brings some details.
Following a meeting between Attorney General Reginald Amor and DPP Roger Gaspard on Wednesday, attorneys attached to the DPP's office delivered a letter demanding an apology from AG Amor. The letter expressed concern over a statement by the AG describing the DPP's reasoning for requesting more staff as unsatisfactory.
The public has spoken about the Attorney General remarks about underperformance. The other side of that, of course, is that, well, if you have short staff, they will be underperforming. So it's a draw match in a sense. And I think they will have to work it out. Maybe the Attorney General would have apologized personally to the DPP, and maybe we could leave it there. But to call upon the AG for a public apology will merely aggravate the situation.
He says there's no need for these public fallouts.
We have the Prime Minister involved, we have the Attorney General involved, we have the Ministry of National Security involved, and of course we have the Director of Public Prosecution. Those skirmishes amongst these very important people should be avoided as far as possible because it affects public confidence in the administration of justice and in government too.
Professor Diosaran suggests a manpower audit to properly evaluate the staffing problem. He says this will ensure a scientific approach to the issue.
How many is really required? Justification. I have heard figures of 1.7. I've heard figures of that he only has 58 out of 129 proposed. The proposals were made in 2013, 2014. These vacancies arise from the conditions under which the attorneys in the DPP office work. I'm not speaking only about salaries. I'm speaking more precisely of an overall system where there is such a sharp turnover. The figures I have seen, long time, some years ago, when I was in Parliament, from the DPP's office, shows a rapid turnover of offices.
When questioned about the issue of the still vacant building rented for millions of dollars to house the DPP's office, Professor Diosaran said there should be some explanation from DPP Gaspard to the public. Nicole M. Romani, TV6 News.
You're listening to Caribbean Perspective with Eddie Frederick. Back to St. Kitts and Nevis, where socio-political commentator Dwyer Astafan indicated in a recent commentary that some people close to the Prime Minister, Dr. Terence Drew, profess their loyalty to his leadership, but he described some of those people as liars and underminers. According to Mr. Astafan, he will do what is within his power to stop such people, as they are doing more harm than good, and regardless of their rank or position, he said they must be smoked out. Glenn Bart again reports.
There are some who profess their loyalty to his leadership, but they are liars and underminers. I know what some of them are doing, and I know who is their man of business, and it isn't Dr. Drew. All of these groups, which I've mentioned, are already doing damage, and they must be stopped. Now, some of you are going to be displeased with me for saying these things, but if you are one of the liars and underminers, you know that I and other people are now on to you. And if you are not one of those liars and underminers, just an innocent bystander who is skeptical of what I'm saying, in time you will see. But I'm not waiting. I'm backing Dr. Drew and the Labour Party under his leadership, and I will do what I have to do to smoke out the liars and the underminers and the square pegs and the opportunists and the other deadweights. We need a lean and clean machine. And the final group of persons who need to step up their game are Dr. Drew's elected colleagues. They must remember that they were elected to Parliament, not to Cabinet. So they are first and foremost representatives of the people, and they must act accordingly, busy as they may be with their ministerial duties. They must never lose touch with the people on the ground. Remember, nobody forced them into candidacy. Whether as representatives or ministers, they must keep in touch with the ground and keep at the forefront of their thoughts and actions the empowerment of the people of this country, especially the small man and woman. But let me put this in perspective. These negative forces to which I've referred are not unique to the Drew administration. They exist in all parties and organizations and always did, even in this organization and this government and this country, which has such a popular leader in Dr. Drew. And though these people may be small in number, I mean the liars and the underminers particularly, they need to be smoked out, regardless of how high up the ladder they may be positioned. Similarly, of course, for the square pegs, the opportunists, and the deadweights.
According to Estefan, keeping such persons employed in the system could be detrimental to Dr. Drew's leadership, as he gave examples of what could happen.
Can you imagine one of them bad-mouthing the young cabinet to an investor? Can you imagine one of them telling an investor who wants to build a small number of residences here for super billionaires who can do so much to help our country and our people? Can you imagine one of them telling an investor that that's not a good idea, that the country doesn't want that? Can you imagine one of them telling a big investor whose money is clean and who can create serious economic opportunity and jobs in the country, that the investor's paperwork must fit into the queue, not high priority, wait its turn for months maybe before it can be addressed? These are some of the things that the liars and underminers are saying and doing. That is why they must be stopped. And that is why we are going to smoke them out. They are not going to be allowed to torpedo the efforts of Dr. Drew and the people of this country to get where we all need to be.
As Stefan said, he remains a strong supporter of the philosophy of the labor movement, but his loyalties are to principles and causes, not to individuals. Glenn Bart reporting for SK Newsline.
10,000 new black water tanks to be provided to needy households to combat the drought conditions in their various areas in Jamaica.
Now for news from Jamaica. The government will be providing 10,000 black water tanks to needy households across Jamaica, starting in fiscal year 2023 to 2024. Prime Minister Andrew Holness outlined details of the undertaking in his 2023 to 2024 budget debate presentation in the House of Representatives on Thursday. He said focus will initially be placed on areas adversely affected by drought, adding that households on the program for advancement through health and education, households recommended by members of parliament and assessed by the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation, will qualify for tanks according to the rules of the program. He indicated that all tanks issued will be placed on the National Geographic Information System database, which will provide valuable information about household storage capacity and how to plan for the delivery of water to the beneficiary households. Holness said there will be a parallel project to assist households to convert the tanks, where possible, into rainwater harvesting systems. The Prime Minister said, and I quote, "The Heart Nesta Trust will be tasked with developing a national service corps of trainee plumbers and future water engineers to install these tanks and convert them into rainwater harvesting system," unquote. This will be a 5-year program with the objective that every vulnerable household must have storage and rainwater capabilities to withstand drought and water service disruption.
Hubbards is once again innovating the way you shop with its new online store, providing 24-hour shopping convenience. You can shop now for appliances, hardware, houseware, building material, and more. Free delivery island-wide. Start shopping now at hubbardshardware.gd. Safe, convenient, reliable.
I am Eddie Frederick. This has been Caribbean Perspective, a whole new approach to highlighting developments in the Caribbean. In the meantime, please continue to log on to CaribbeanPerspective.com for more daily news and more.